Welcome to Armchair Expert. I'm Dan Shepard. Sad news. Well, happy news, really. Miniature Mouse is on a little much-needed R&R vacation. Somewhere here in California. I don't even quite know the location. Do you, Rob?
It's near Palm Springs, but I think that might have changed.
Okay, great. So somewhere in the Palm Springs area, Monica's hosting all of her pals from Atlanta, Georgia, and they're having a big blowout, which I'm so excited for her about. And, of course, I was in Michigan for some medical things for a friend. But I'm back. I'm so happy to be in the attic. Our guest today is Erin Lee Carr, and she came to us circuitously, I think that's the word and how you say it, through Lena Dunham. She suggested that we have her on, and what a great recommendation. And then as I learned about her, I realized I've seen all of her movies just by coincidence, and I knew her dad. Right now on HBO, she has an incredible documentary about the female Olympic molesting scandal called At the Heart of Gold. That's currently on. You probably also saw her documentary that was incredible, and it's now a TV show called Mommy, Dead, and Dearest about Munchausen by proxy, which was super fascinating. And even more exciting, she gave us a link to her new documentary that's coming out called I Love You, Now Die, The Commonwealth versus Michelle Carter, which is that very famous case everyone saw in the news about a gal who was texting a boy to kill himself. Rob, did you watch the link?
I did. It was great.
It's awesome. It's 2 parts, and it led to so many juicy debates. I cannot recommend it enough. Look for it on HBO coming soon. And then just on top of everything else, Erin Lee Carr, what a fucking delight of a human being. So please enjoy Erin Lee. Oh, before we go, there's still tickets available. They're going to go quick for Cleveland, Detroit, and Chicago. If you're in Minneapolis, they're gone. And I'm sorry, and we're all very excited to come party in the Midwest. So go to our website, www.armchairexpertpod.com, and follow a link and buy some tickets for Cleveland, Detroit, or Chicago at the end of June. All right. Love you.
He's an armchair expert.
Well, first of all, it's so fun to meet you. We both know Lena Dunham, and she said, I really want you to interview my friend Erin. She's wonderful. And I said, then let's do it. And then I knew that you did At the Heart of Gold, which I watched. And then I started reading about you. I was like, oh my goodness, I know all about you because I read The Night of the Gun, because your father, David Carr, was friends with Tom Arnold back in Minnesota or Wisconsin or something. And so Tom was friends with him, recommended I read that book. I think it's my favorite drug memoir. Is that the genre it's called?
That's one of them, yeah.
Yeah.
Recovery genre, but what the really bad stuff that happened. How do we account for our sins sort of book? Yes.
And do you like those books in general?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Do you have favorites?
I love Caroline Knapp's Drinking a Love Story.
Oh, I've never read that.
It is just this incredibly weird, devastating story of a female journalist who was dually ambitious and addicted and found herself between 2 relationships, a lot of infidelity and then the toxicity of alcohol while being really ambitious as a journalist. And she's no longer with us. She died very early on in her life, but the book
From the disease or other things?
It was weirdly very early cancer.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
But she also wrote a book about loving dogs and that dogs are this incredible primary relationship and it taught her how to love.
You guys are both.
Can you make me look like Nora Jones? I just the dreamboat.
Don't we all want to look like Nora Jones?
Damn.
It's absurd. I know.
Yeah.
And be kind like her.
I know.
God damn it! It just sets the bar.
I know.
And let me just tell you, those photos do not actually do justice to what her presence is. Have you met her?
No.
I was I think I'm head over heels in love with this person. Just looking at her aura, it was very captivating. But anyways, when I read that book, I was pretty shocked with. I'm used to hearing in a meeting things like that, but there's a certain safety in that we've all done really despicable things we're ashamed of. So for your father to have put that stuff out into public, particularly the stuff concerning you and your sister, I just remember thinking, God, do I have that level of bravery? Could I own my mistakes to that degree?
And what's your answer?
I feel like I'm inching towards it on here, But boy, that's, I don't know, because I have 2 daughters. I define a lot of my self-esteem and my identity based on how good of a dad I am or am not on any given day. So yeah, that'd be a real hard one to cop to. Because in a nutshell, for people who haven't read it, your dad was a cocaine addict. Yeah, a crack cocaine, he and your mother. And you guys arrived, you and your sister, your twin sister, and they were very active addicts. The thing I remember the most was, isn't there a story in there about them going to a crack house, or maybe it was just your dad, and leaving you guys in the car in the middle of winter?
So it's the baby in the snowsuits. Basically, my mom was away and he needed to get high. And he said he wasn't the sort of dad that would leave us at home alone. So he thought the best thing was to bring us with him in the car. There's an incredible moth where he recounts this night. It's a storytelling audio podcast. And he goes into the crack house. He's supposed to be there for 5 minutes. It ends up being what could have been an hour to 3 hours. And he goes back to the car and is like, what if they're dead? He checks if we're breathing in our snowsuits. And so it's his moment of reckoning, because he knew that, he said that God would not forgive.
That. Yeah.
How old were you guys?
I think it was 8 months.
Oh,
maybe it was very early on.
Wow.
Like, don't bring us.
Yeah.
Don't bring us in the snowsuits. Leave us in the crib.
But when you're, look, I've made decisions that in the cold, harsh light of sobriety make zero logical sense. But at the time, they were like bulletproof, Occam's razor. This is the simplest, best approach to this problem that now defy all logic. So, man, just handling 8-month-old twins, if you were dead sober and you had help, would be too much.
Yeah.
You probably wouldn't even choose to involve them in an errand, like go pick up the dry cleaning or something. But you had to but man, I can imagine going like, nope, no sweat. I'm going to pull it. I will be in there a total of 4 minutes. I'm going to grab the shit. I'll come back home. Then everything's golden. Wow. And the fact that he owned that. Now, you and I have in common that, so my dad also was an addict. Thank God he didn't have primary custody of us.
Thank God my dad did.
And he got sober. He died 30 years sober. How many years was your dad sober?
Probably around 3 or 4 years.
3 or 4 years. Boy, man. And also there's a point in the book, I just remember it being a great kind of cautionary tale. He had some long-term sobriety. Life was going fantastic, right? He hosted a dinner party, and people had left little bits of alcohol in different glasses, and he decided to combine them all into one glass as he was cleaning up, and then he got to the sink to pour it down the sink. And this is with some pretty long-term sobriety.
14 years.
14?
How many?
14.
And just said, bottoms up, and drank the weird fucking mix of every kind of alcohol that would be served at a party. And I just read that and I was like, oh God, yeah, that's an option for me still. Like just cleaning up and being like, fuck it. It's crazy.
And it's what can you do to cushion yourself between you and the fuckets? He just wasn't doing that anymore.
Right. Yeah, I compare it to the tragic success of vaccines. Part of what they suffer from is how effective they are. So people don't see people with polio. And then they think, who's going to get polio? I'd rather not have that chemical in my kid. And it's like, yeah, because it worked and you don't know what polio looks like. So it's like the better you get, it gets kind of harder to remember maybe that you need to do all those things, right?
Yes. Well, and success. Like, what does it mean when we sort of come across a modicum of success? Mm-hmm. That we begin to feel special, or like you don't want to sit in the room with everyone who's mentally ill, even though every room that we're in is probably filled with mental illness. I mean, I just think that for when I asked him, about his relapses, it really was like, I started to believe I was special and that I had fixed it, and that it was a crack problem. It wasn't an alcohol problem. If you look at him diagnostically, it definitely was an alcohol problem. But I think that what we need to examine is like relapse is a part of recovery. And there's this total weird thing that happens. Like he relapsed, and you shake your head and it's, you're in the naughty chair for a while and you have to raise your hand. It's like, yeah, we're alcoholics. Yeah. We're going to drink again unless we don't.
Yeah. It's the most kind of predictable thing probably that we'll do. The thing I don't like about this whole, continuous sobriety is it discounts the fact that someone who maybe relapsed 10 times over the course of 20 years, but ultimately was sober for 19 of 20 years, that's a huge win for an addict. Even if there was relapses in there and whatnot, it's still a huge win and a huge victory. And you can't only evaluate it by how much continuous sobriety there was, yeah?
Absolutely.
Okay, so I do wonder how many parallels we have, because your dad was charismatic. I met him before. He was interesting, charismatic, a good talker. My dad was a car salesman. He was the ultimate good talker. He was universally loved in AA. Like everybody in AA loved. People would come up to me like, I can't imagine having your dad as a dad. And I got a little resentful about that personally. Is there any baggage that comes with having a dad who's like known for having written this book and he owned a lot of stuff, but I bet he didn't own some stuff you would have liked to own, or did that not happen?
I mean, there was a small amount of narcissism that persisted in his personality where I was an audience member. I was one of somebody that, I would be calling him and it would kind of, he wanted to talk about meeting you or, the story that he wrote. And it was just like being his child, it was sort of secondary. I was somebody that could take in and understand and speak his language, but I was listening.
Right.
And so I think that there was resentment in that, but I also, if you ever read or look at an interview with him, like he's so smart that I was genuinely learning every conversation we had. So the resentment would dissipate when I was like, oh, this is an education in craft or how to talk to people or how to get to the story and sort of like thinking about that. And now that he's not here, I'm so proud of being his kid. I want to continue talking about him because I'm so proud of him. I'm so proud of The Night of the Gun, his book.
Yeah.
It's epic and devastating and traumatic. And like, there's almost nothing like it. It's
I agree.
400 pages.
It's really, really well written. On top of everything else, like the most brutal honesty I've heard, mixed with just great writing.
He had a way of tapping into universals that I think that not everybody can really do.
Now, did you have any periods of estrangement from him? Or you always, because my story was I was resentful towards him. I then got sober. That kind of helped us, but I still was carrying a lot of stuff. Everything I hate about myself is what I hated about him. And then he got diagnosed with cancer, and then we spent a lot of time together at the end, and it was incredibly cathartic and healing and wonderful. And I just wondered if you had any of that similar journey.
Yeah, I think that you're being able to like see the conflict and see the things in yourself that you didn't like about him, but also forgiving him, that's rare. I think that a lot of people aren't like, they just let the resentment build and there's no forgiveness. I mean, my dad was my primary parent. And so even if I got angry at him, I didn't always have like a place to stand.
Sure. Well, ultimately he did do the work, right?
Yes.
He raised you.
Right.
Yeah. So that's relevant.
When you're reading the book, can you remove yourself when you're reading it? I would feel like it'd be so hard as a character in that story. It's so personal.
It's mainly about him though. So it's they're developing it for FX, Bob Odenkirk, and I read about him playing my dad, and they're trying to do it, and so I reread it after he died, and it was kind of just like hearing his voice.
Yeah.
His language and the way that he constructs sentences is sort of like Deadwood meets Don Quixote. It's like very. It's not a way that my brain works, and like I literally just wrote a book, and I was like, it can be nothing like this. This is so well written. But I don't know. I guess I don't see myself as the baby in the snowsuit. Mm-hmm. I see myself as somebody who's listening to my dad. Mm-hmm. I think it's so cool what parenting does to people. Like you with your daughters, and like you change little by little, and all of a sudden, like you are there for someone else.
And you start becoming aware. And now that I have kids, I can see in their eyes, I'm not a human being, which is fine. I can accept it.
Yeah.
But I realize like, no, I'm not like other people for them. I'm supposed to be perfect, and I shouldn't be tired, and I shouldn't have any of these things, because I'm actually in a third category, which is I'm not a human. Yeah, Dad,
I want something from you. Get it for me now.
Yes. And my expectation is you'll be perfect as I expected my dad to be. Okay. You grew up in Minnesota. And you ultimately went to University of Wisconsin-Madison, and you studied communication. What kind of romantic fantasies did you have for your life? Is your current position unexpected, or is this where you were aiming?
I really wanted to be a film critic.
Okay.
I was obsessed with watching movies and thinking about them. And I remember I had like all these entertainment weeklies, like papering my walls. I was obsessed with Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Loved
Like,
Buffy.
yeah, like just every episode 10 times, knew the dialogue, went to the conventions, had the steak. You know, really just like sexy stuff.
Wait, you went to the conventions. Oh, good for you. Did you ever meet like a boy there or a girl
No,
there that you were like?
no one was interested.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I imagine like I have a
fun.
fantasy that where like people would fall in love. Like you find like, wait, you like Buffy too? Like I imagine that would just be a real shortcut.
romantic.
Yeah.
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 It was great. David Boreanaz was my first celebrity crush.
I mean, I had like pictures of him with his shirt off in my locker.
Oh, good.
Like just like, and it was
Angel.
like, I don't, you know.
You guys are 6 months apart, by the way. just
Oh,
to
I
cue
didn't
you
realize
in.
how close.
August 87, April 88. Do you know Gillian Flynn, who she is? You guys have a similar thing because her father taught film at college, and then she was kind of obsessed with that stuff too, and then it became her.
She asked for a copy of Mommy Den Dearest, my film about Munchausen, while she was, I think, like writing on
Oh, Sharp Objects.
Sharp Objects. Yeah.
Oh, is that flattering as all hell?
Deeply.
Yeah.
And a babe
Maybe.
as smart and cool as that, looking at my work in the process of creative discovery. I
Yeah.
mean, it really doesn't get better.
That's awesome.
But it's just like, I wanted to be a film critic, and my dad was like, hey, there's 6 of those jobs.
Right,
And
right,
you
right,
have to
right.
be a really good writer, and they're men.
Uh-huh.
And he wasn't ever discouraging me in a sexist, weird way. He thought I could do whatever.
He just wanted you to know what the playing
realistic.
field was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it really helps to have realists around us figuring that kind of stuff out. Because, like, you know, getting very deep into getting my PhD in Buffy studies, I don't know if I'd be sitting here. You know what I mean?
You know,
Like,
oh, you'd be sitting in another attic, probably.
yeah, my own, like my hair falling
A
out.
basement of some sort.
you know where it gets crazy complicated, or at least I'm forecasting into the future that it's going to get crazy complicated. I want my daughters to dress however the fuck they want, and I want them to party if they want to party, and I want them to do whatever they want to do. I also feel inclined to tell them, read Missoula, Krakauer's book on rape.
Yes.
You'll be hard-pressed to find a sober girl in that situation or a sober guy. So just know, like, the
But look
rape...
at the Heart of Gold. Oh, those
Yes.
young girls were sober. There was
That's
not
true.
any of element of
That's-
that's my film about sex abuse and USA
Yeah.
Gymnastics. I mean, that's a trusted position. There are predators everywhere.
That's
Yes.
true. That's true.
Tagline for my life.
It is, and I feel an obligation to let them know what the reality of the world is, which is, so I watched, I'm going to jump ahead for 1 second, but I want to really dig into Heart of Gold because I loved it so much. I'm a survivor of molestation. It gave me nightmares last night so bad. Had nightmares all night long.
sorry.
It's okay. And I talk about it all the time. And I like to think that I've processed a ton of it. I woke up this morning, I'm like, no. In preparation to talking to you, not only did I watch Heart of Gold, but I also decided to listen to the This American Life. Have you heard that episode about the kid who realizes he is attracted only to children and he doesn't really know what to
Tarred
do?
and feathered.
Tarred and feathered.
Right. I've listened to that 3 times.
It's incredible. And it's really relevant for me to keep in the discussion when I see something like Heart of Gold, because I want to kill the guy. I want to kill the guy. I want to kill the guy in public. I want to be the dad who wanted to kick his ass in the courtroom. That's my nature. And then I also have a little voice in my head saying, no one went to the store and picked out, you know what? I want my sexual preference to be children. Nobody would pick that. Also, I don't have to talk myself out of molesting kids. What a fucking horrendous way to go through life. I just look at your documentary, I'm like, everyone is a victim of this whole thing.
But people put themselves in positions of powers where they have access to children. That is a choice.
Yes.
Our sexual preference and proclivity is obviously not a choice, but the intense research and the ability of Larry Nassar to make sure that his life was designed to have access to children all the time, that's what makes him
A serial
totally
killer.
unforgivable. I mean,
Yes.
one of the most prolific pedophiles of our time.
Yes, it's completely unforgivable. I completely agree. And then in that Tar and Feathered, they give a statistic that is maybe 1 to 3% of males are pedophiles. That's between 1 and 3 million people. That's terrifying. And again, I feel obligated to let my kids know, just so you know, there's a few million of them potentially. It's all very tricky and dicey. Let's rewind. So you wanted to review movies. So when you went to the University of Wisconsin, was that what you were actively in pursuit of?
Really specialize in drinking beer.
Oh, you did?
And another common element.
Yes. Now, I had this really honest relationship with my mom. And I said to her at a certain point, I'm going to drink. I want to be honest with you. I realize Dad's an alcoholic, and so are all my uncles, but it's an experiment I have to try. I can't leave planet Earth and not find out if I am or I'm not. And she's like, I'm really scared for you, but I understand that you need to do it. What was your process of going, I'm going to try this despite knowing what I know about my dad?
The moment I drank alcohol, it felt like magic. I just couldn't. I drank to a blackout at every instance without any awareness of what came before me. I don't know. I just like, it was like to have access to like turn your brain off, like, and to have alcohol was so worth it.
Yeah.
And I didn't care if I had blackouts or like other people didn't drink like I did. If I got to experience that warmth that would start to coat your body. And it like, and the first time I did cocaine, I talk about in the book, like it felt like my DNA had been completed. And I was like, oh, wait, it literally has. Like that I was born with my parents, like, you know, doing drugs in the delivery room. Like, you know, like there's a part of my DNA that where drugs and alcohol, it just is at such a close contact. So it would make total sense. But
did you, when you first started experimenting with it, did you have any sense that, oh, I got to be careful knowing what my dad, or did you never have that kind of fear of it?
I mean, I don't want to come across as a real dummy, but I mean, I just like, I think like when you're 17, like you distance yourself from like who your parents are. And you're like, that's them problem. I'm my own person. I mean, where my mother was deeply addicted to pills. And so I never took any pills. Like I was able to not do that. But when it came to alcohol, I wasn't able to make that sort of educated decision.
It's also everywhere at college. You have to be a special 17-year-old to say, I'm avoiding this.
Oh, I got sober for senior year, and I went to all those parties and tried to hit on girls sober and all that stuff. And it was
brutal
fucking
stuff.
It's not going to work.
Girlhood and boyhood and alcohol mix.
Yes.
As a matter of course. And so it's sort of, despite having generational proclivities, like you're going to gravitate towards it. But also there is a genetic component to this.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think that it takes someone I think it's so rare to be able to like look at that and be like, nope, not going to be me, and I'll stay away from it. But I also think like your sobriety made you who you are today, and like that's a good thing.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that in order to get sober, you need to have alcoholism. So like, where does that?
Oh, yeah. I'm ultimately very grateful for the whole experience. At this point, I don't wish I had not gone down that road. There are a few incidents I wish didn't occur, but in general, I'm glad I did everything I did and ended up here. Do you feel that way?
Yeah, I think sobriety is a superpower. The most prolific people I know are honestly sober because when at night they're thinking, they're present, they're working, they're connecting the dots. And I'm not saying anything against non-sober people.
No, it's fine.
But like people turn off after 7 p.m. It's like, okay, you know, boop-a-doop. And, you know, I think that even if people try brief periods of sobriety, like everybody makes fun of like dry January. But like, you know, see what happens when you put down substances, even if you don't have problems. I think you'll be surprised at what you can accomplish.
Yeah, Brene Brown has a good point about that. It's like, yes, it does. It lops off certain anxieties and things, but it also lops off the counter to that as well, joy and presence and all these things.
Please join our cult.
Yeah,
come on. It's like I'm just like a PSA.
Okay, so while you were at school, I guess when you went to Vice, because when you got out of college, you went to Vice on an internship. And at that time, were you still imagining that you were going to be a journalist of the written variety?
No, I mean, I went there looking to be in their video department.
Okay.
I saw that, you know, what they were doing with videos and journalism and telling stories was one of the new ways of doing it. And I wanted to be a part of that.
Right. And you were a fan of Vice, I'm sure. Yeah, it's very exciting and scary and wonderful. And
especially in 2009. I mean, I started working there in 2010. I mean, they were on the up later. There was just this sort of cool factor they were able to tap into,
Right.
without any of the sort of, now it's sort of a little bit seen as more douchey. But, I think it just...
Well, one of the founders really went sideways, right? Isn't one of the guys a white nationalist now?
So Gavin McGinnis, who they cut ties with pretty early on because he was espousing pretty anti-Semitic beliefs, and yes, he is a white nationalist.
Yeah, he's
That
like
often gets left out of the story.
the Proud Boys or something. Is that the
not
name of
heard
his
that.
group? The Proud Boys or something?
You would know. I don't know.
Yeah, he's
You
He's a
would know 'cause
spokesperson.
You're a white nationalist.
yeah.
I mean, you're the white man in the room. Not over here.
That's
too.
true. That's true. That's true.
Just making like inferences.
Yeah. I've seen almost all of your work just by accident. I love documentaries. I saw a click print gun, the inside story of the 3D printed gun movement. You did that while you were at Vice still, right?
Right.
Some guy figured out how to print a plastic gun with a 3D printer, and he felt like everyone should do that. Now, were you at that point just being assigned things, or were you able to kind of pick what you were going to do a documentary about?
I've always had a fair amount of agency and been able to pick what I wanted to do. And I think that one of the skill sets I bring is convincing people to let me do what I want to do without any sort of oversight.
Right. So you're a good saleswoman.
It's a good skill.
So you're quoted as saying you're interested in the weirdos on the internet.
You know, I love thinking about virality and story and what is the thing that you are going to click on? Like, I want to make things that are interesting, that are psychological thrillers, but are not hard to watch. A lot of people have been telling me At the Heart of Gold is really hard to watch. But now my spectrum of what's hard to watch is so skewed because I've been making things for so long that are about disturbing things. Mm-hmm. But I just think that, Reddit and Twitter and these platforms, they guide you in what is viral. And so documentaries, we're having this incredible age where people want information, and documentaries and podcasts and TV shows where it's so informational, but it's also fun. And so a lot of my films are psychological renderings of complicated people because I grew up with a complicated person.
Yeah.
We are
Right.
not equal to our best or worst action. And so what does that mean as it intersects with crime? And so that's like always been a driving influence. And my dad, who was my mentor and a celebrated New York Times journalist, he said, get a beat, get really good at it, and then people will contact you to do that. And so you look at my films, Thought Crimes, which is about the cannibal cop, Mommy Dead and Dearest, which is about Gypsy Rose, Michelle Carter, that's coming out in a couple of months on HBO, about Michelle Carter, the woman who texted her boyfriend to kill himself.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
It creates outrage. And so I want to show all the elements of the story.
One of my proclivities that my wife points out, and it disturbs her a bit, is I'm obsessed with Pablo Escobar, Putin. I'm obsessed with people whose will is undeniable. Like, just take aside the morals of it. This guy, Pablo Escobar, growing up in a fucking favela in Medellin, becoming the 8th richest man in the world. I'm just intoxicated by that. Like that someone could decide, I don't give a fuck, and I'm gonna capture power and wealth and all these things through hell or high water. I don't know why I'm so drawn to that.
You love a rise and fall, but we all love the rise because it's who we see ourselves as being. Like, how can we take notes? What is something that set that little boy apart from the others? And like, how can we apply that to our lives?
Right, because it's not
without making the mistakes of the falling, because like it did not go well for him.
Ultimately, no. But you can't
Or with
just
Putin, hopefully. Please,
Yeah.
I don't welcome you, trolls.
TBD.
TBD.
I mean, you just look at pictures of Putin, and it's just spellbinding. I mean, we're very similar. It's like, how do people assemble power?
Yes.
Stay tuned for more Armchair Expert, if you dare.
And you can't just say, like in Pablo Escobar's case, you can't just say it's brutality, like that he had unbridled brutality that allowed him to rise to power, because many people are brutal and sociopathic and all this. So there's other stuff going on that I find to be really
It's a cult of
fascinating.
personality.
Yeah.
demigod status. Like, you know, how do you set yourself apart? And like some of that is through charm.
Well, yeah. And also, again, both Pablo is 5'8", and he was pudgy. And he was a pothead. It's not the American president archetype. Putin, too.
He's got a weird face, but it draws you in. I have an office that I go to where there's a picture up of Putin on the wall.
Shirtless on horseback? Which one is it?
It's a headshot.
Oh, it's a headshot.
And so, but it looks like he's watching you.
At all times.
At all times. And so it's like, keep working.
Right, right.
Oh, that's great.
It's not my office, to be clear. I have pictures I have Sam B up in my, because I think it's good to have pictures of powerful women surrounding you. Just like Great Danes, you know.
That's a powerful woman dog.
And so I am not at all drawing a parallel between women and dogs. Like, it's just, that's what was in front of me.
Sure.
But yeah.
We're staring at a picture of a Great Dane for the listeners. But also they have power, these people. They have power, but they also have control. They have ultimate control.
There
and
you
that's
go.
what you're always seeking. And so when you see that in people, it's attractive or interesting at the very least.
Great observation. You're dead right. Like, presumably, yeah, Pablo Escobar had complete control of his surroundings. He had fucking exotic animals. He had off-road vehicles. He had, he had this compound and he had airplanes. He could fly anywhere. Yeah. It seemed as if he was even more powerful than a dictator in many ways. Okay, so you were at Vice for 3 years and you did a lot of great stuff. You produced Spaced Out, which was a look at space and the people who were obsessed with it. And I think there's, how many installments of that were there?
No idea.
Okay. I want to say there was like
no
12
memory.
or something.
I'll look it up.
It feels like a different life ago. I don't know.
And then you did Click, Print, Gun in 2013. So 6 years. So you would have been 25 when you did that? So fucking impressive. And that got a ton of views and press and whatnot. Yeah, 12 million people watched that. And does that becomes a watershed moment for you career-wise?
Yeah, I mean, I was making no money at Vice, and suddenly I had this hit on my hands. And it was my voiceover. I insisted on having my own voice in it. And I was like, all right, how can I leverage this and get some money?
Yeah, monetize this bastard.
So then I went to a company that poached me, and it's The Verge. And they were, ready to pay me like an adult woman. And I was like, let's do this. And due to my alcoholism and probably pressure to run the show my way, because I'm a director, and, just within 4 months, I was cut. I was fired. And they were just like, absolutely not. We are not interested.
Because you had a lot of opinions, like too many opinions?
I mean, I broke a camera on a shoot. It was a technology company that was making great, beautiful, stylish videos about iPhones. Right. And they fired me, and I just didn't know what to do because I wanted to be a part of media, but I couldn't go back to Vice because I had I had left in this fiery sort of fuck you. And I was like, I'm making money, bitches. They were like, yeah, good luck with that. And a guy literally said to me, you are going to fail and I'm going to laugh at you.
Ooh.
And I kind of took that in, those moments in time where people really attack you. Yeah. And I was vulnerable, but he was right. I was fired within 4 months. And so I didn't really know what to do next.
Were you having at all any fits of megalomania after making something so successful and then leaving and going to the next place? Was your ego hard to bridle at that moment?
I don't think it was ego. I was still somebody that was eager to learn from others.
Okay.
I was really well mentored. I do think it was alcoholism. I just could not control drinking at night. And so it's really hard to be a productive member of the team if your brain isn't working at night. And so then that would factor into the next day when I would be hungover. And so I actually really respect and credit the company for letting me go pretty quickly. At the time, I was so embarrassed. I don't know if either of you guys have ever been fired, but it feels like
Oh, yeah. Even if you don't want the job, it's just the actual, we don't need you, we break up with you.
I mean, it's complete rejection, and it intersects with your financial security, which activates your safety. Am I going to be okay? Am I going to be okay? And so I write about this in the book, All That You Leave Behind, which is about my dad and about figuring stories out and things like that. And I was fired, and I was so humiliated and so embarrassed, and I was like, I'm not going to work again. And the next day, my dad had a habit of sending me incredible emails. And he said, we will prove them wrong.
That's sweet.
Nice.
And he just said, you're going to be okay. And then 2 months later, I was in a room with Sheila Nevins, who's the head of HBO Docs at the time, pitching features.
So, really quick though, how did your dad respond? Your dad must have smelled that you were struggling with alcohol. And what was his approach to that?
I think he could only offer advice if I asked for it.
Right.
And he could be a role model regarding sobriety, but, I think he believed in the secret society response. Like, you can just provide access to meetings, if the person asks. So he really, he stopped inviting me to media events. He's like, no, thank you. Because I went to a Gawker party with him and got slam-fisted, and he was like, this is not an excuse for you to get drunk and embarrass me.
Right.
What are you doing?
Yeah.
So
he had some boundaries.
He had good boundaries. He said, I don't welcome your drunkenness in my life. But for the most part, it really took for me finally, having my own moment of reckoning and calling him and saying I need to stop drinking. And then he did, 12-step me.
Right. So similarly, my dad had this very healthy kind of non-codependent way of watching me go through it all. And he just, I think, was like, oh yeah, he's on a path and I know where it ends. And when it ends, he'll call me and I'll be there. And he seemingly was so peaceful about that. And I aspire to that if my children ever struggle with it. Because that's really, if you're an addict, there's nothing, he's not going to say some magic words to you that are going to make you want sobriety, right?
Yeah, I mean, I had gotten really drunk at a friend's engagement party and hit on both the groom-to-be and the bride-to-be. You're going to see pictures of me and you're going to be like, wow, that's nice stuff. And I got disinvited from the wedding because it was an engagement party.
Oh, boy.
And got the most brutal email in my inbox when I asked where my invite was. And I called my dad and I was like, so I'm having a problem. I am, fired and I'm losing friends quickly.
Oh, wow.
So what's the deal here? Do I give up alcohol for a week? And he's like, yeah, a month.
For your life.
Let's hurry this up. So I said, I'm going to give it up for a week. He said, you're going to do it for a month and we're going to see if your life gets better. And dropped me off at a couple of meetings and introduced me to some women and just said, start this and see how it goes.
Yeah. And you liked it. Mm-hmm. That's incredible. Okay, so shortly thereafter you get fired. You do end up with a home at HBO. Is that the most thrilling moment professionally?
So I'm a freelancer, a really deeply proud freelancer. Okay. And Sheila Nevins agreed to give me a small development deal when I was 25, which would end up becoming Thought Crimes. But it wasn't when the development deal and the movie was greenlit, it was now I had to do the thing. Yeah. I had to make the thing. And so while there was a huge amount of excitement, and I've talked to people and like, oh, you're pinching HBO, it creates this jealousy and intensity with other people.
Sure.
And I was like, but I had to perform. I had to do it.
Yeah.
Couldn't rest on the laurels of it. So I made my first feature, Thought Crimes, in 6 months. And because I had to, the Cannibal Cop, which is this guy that was convicted of conspiring to kidnap, rape, torture, and eat young women. He was being held at a federal penitentiary. I would go visit him, trying to get a camera in. And then a judge overturned the conviction, and he was set free. And he was just all of these networks were vying for his exclusive. He was the prettiest girl at the ball.
Sure.
And I was like, don't forget about me.
Yeah,
and he was like, oh, God. And so I had this development deal, and I knew I needed to get an interview with him and that I had to forbid him from speaking with any other networks.
Aye.
And they were probably going to offer him money. So I was like, okay, how do I do this? So I call him and I say, I need to interview you at your mom's house. And he says, you know what? I'm not able to do that. I really want to consider my options. Mm-hmm. He turns me down. So I call my dad and he's like, go over there now. Go. Just show up. So I show up there with the camera and I say, I'm really sorry to do this, but we need to sit down for an interview now.
Yeah.
And so we get it, and that ends up being what turns into the feature. And
okay,
then,
really quick.
Yeah.
What's your anxiety level walking up the porch? Are you actually, because it could go either way.
Yeah. It'd be scary to do this to any person, walk up and say, demand something, let alone a scary person.
Well, and he was a cop for a long time, so
Lots of stuff.
He's presumably there's weapons in the house.
Yeah.
Well, it's like, I think how I was raised was to move towards fear. And I had a note card at my desk that do something that makes you nervous every day.
Uh-huh.
And so this was a prime example, but this is what separates, the boys from the men.
Yeah.
And so going up there, like I was drenched in sweat, but I knew it was going to get me to where I needed to go in order to make the movie. And so I just sort of like, I just did it and got the interview. And then you have to get someone to sign what's called an exclusivity agreement. And so he did this really weird thing where he said, I will do it if you watch a movie with me.
Ooh. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Monica's making a face right now.
Horrifying.
Big red flag.
So like, I was like, what? So he wanted to watch an HBO documentary film.
Okay.
And on, sitting there, and I just like, I'm as honest as possible in these moments because I did watch a movie with him because I was like, okay, like he's not going to touch me. It's going to be fine. I don't know why I'm talking about this.
No,
It's
I love
really
it.
There's a really weird thing when you're trying to be a journalist and get a story. And that seems like a normal line, but talking to you guys about it, it's not normal stuff.
But
Right.
It's not.
You felt like it was a normal ask when he asked?
No, I knew that I needed, like, he was going to sign the It was not a pay for play. Like, I wasn't obviously offering any money.
Right.
But I was like, okay, like, there's a genuine, like, he wants to watch an HBO film. I'm making an HBO film. We're going to talk about it. But as I left that small place in Queens, and he listens to everything I do, so, like, he'll be very mad. Like, Gil, you did this. Like, don't lie about it.
Don't fucking Gil.
He thought we were going to be together.
Oh, okay.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Really?
Now, let me ask you that.
It's so fascinating.
It's hard to imagine talking about this knowing the person might listen. So I recognize the
He
stakes
will.
here.
Okay.
But let me ask you something. While you were making the documentary, you must have been cognizant on some level that he did think that.
Right.
And that is obviously great leverage to have. And then is there any kind of ethical dilemma? Because there'd be none for me, but I wonder if there would be for you.
We reached a point of it where it was really uncomfortable.
Mid coitus.
God, if anyone sees a picture of me and him, they're like, please, Dax, don't make me think about that. He basically saw my camera guy leave the room and went over and started rubbing my shoulders. And I said, Gil, you're not allowed to do that. And he said, don't worry, I touch my dog like that. And so I immediately left. I called my dad and I said, this is what happened. He said, okay, I'm going to get you on the phone with a couple of journalists and we're going to talk about like source relationships and how to manage it at this unique pressure point. Because he's like, I'm 6 foot. I've never been intimidated by a source. Like, I don't know how to really guide you in this moment. Because I want you to be successful, but I want you to have boundaries.
Yeah.
And so he put me on a phoner with someone from the Times and then actually Andrew Jarecki, who was making
the Jinx.
The Jinx.
Yes.
And had to
Talk
have
about a
boundaries.
blurry
Oh, big
relationship. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And so Andrew just gave me great advice.
He did.
Yeah.
Okay, because when I hear this story, my mind goes to counter espionage, like people that were in the CIA during the Cold War, male and female, like they fucked people. There was like a greater objective on the table.
The Americans.
The Americans.
Yeah.
The Russians fucked a lot, if you believe
they
that
sure
show.
did.
But that's where my mind goes. Is there's only a handful of jobs where this would be, kind of
Relevant.
Yeah.
Can you share what he told you, the advice?
It was basically don't answer his phone calls after 9. Have people around you when you guys are filming and be upfront with him about what the film is going to be like.
Right.
And ultimately, the film, I think, is incredibly true to the story and representative of, Gil as a complicated figure that I don't think he should be in jail, but I do think he has boundary problems. I mean, he was talking about beheading his wife and like having somebody fuck the corpse. I mean, this was not like, normal stuff. I always bring this kind of stuff up.
Yeah. It's good.
And so he just was like, you need to figure out where the boundaries are and have like his parole, have the numbers in your phone if you need to use them.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, Gil ended up hating the movie.
Oh, he did.
Hated it with a fiery passion.
Felt betrayed.
Yeah, and like really sort of like would text me very disturbing things. And I was like, dude, you just got out of jail. Like, let's be careful about the texting. Like, you know, and FYI, I was fair to you. And like, name me one incorrect thing that was in that film.
Yeah.
So I think that it was a really weird foray into making features about complicated people. And like, you'll notice I've never made a film about a man since.
Oh, interesting.
I only deal with women because like I find women to be really rational and like can deal with the complicated nature of themselves in a way that I think, you know, Dax not included, like men have this weird
you can
block.
include me.
Like
It's harder. It is. Yeah, it is.
Now, do you think that on any level you need to employ what, say, actors do? Like if an actor were to play a serial killer, they can't approach it like I'm playing a monster or it'll be one-dimensional. So they have to find a way to love, empathize, sympathize, care about the character they're playing, because every person does care about themselves, right? So it's this weird mental gymnastics, I guess. And when you're making a movie, is there any part of you that has to force yourself to be extra compassionate, maybe in a way that you wouldn't be as just an observer of the story?
It's a great question. Yeah, I think that every film and every subject guides me in how I behave, like during the process. Like, you know, interacting with sex abuse survivors in such an intense way, it was really giving the power over to them and saying, like, what do you want to talk about?
Yeah.
You know, how can we talk about this in a way that you're not re-triggered or re-victimized? So sensitivity, lots of eye contact, keeping the crew really small. You know, it was just very targeted decisions. And so in working with like Mommy, Dead and Dearest, like I wanted there to be playfulness with that because we're talking about someone who had their mom murdered, but there's also this element of fantasy with Gypsy Rose. And like, I wanted the movie to have laugh lines and, you know, you just meet this sort of cast of characters who are real life people.
Yeah.
And like Gypsy's grandpa came up to me and kissed me on the mouth. And I was just like, boop. Like,
Wow.
and then they, you know, like they talked about like Dee Dee's ashes being flushed down the toilet. And I was like, don't laugh. Like, we're just like sitting in this room. So I think that every film has been almost like a split personality. Like I'm a different person when I start it and when I end it.
Yeah.
And what are the lessons that I can bring to the next films in terms of radical empathy and like, you know, playfulness.
Yeah, the documentaries I tend to like a lot are the ones that are open enough to allow that to come in, where it's like, wow, I'm laughing at the murderer. Now I'm horrified by the murderer. I thought the Jinx was brilliant in that way, that I said to, we all watched it together, Monica and Kristen and I was like, you know, he definitely killed all those people. There's no question there. And I would certainly have him as a house guest next week. I don't know why. I love him. I want to protect him. He reminds me of Kermit the Frog. Like, and I would lock his door as he stayed in our house. Like, there's this, for me, that's like a big win, that I would like recognize the person's a monster, yet have these complicated feelings about the person as if they were a parent or a sibling or something.
Yeah, I mean, you're responding to tonal switches. I think that there is this weird thing that happens if you're watching a financial crimes doc. It's all investigative, you know, or you're watching crime and it's like, it's all sadness and this like sort of low rung. And I think that the directors that you and I both really like, it's like, yeah, playing with that, capturing the Friedmans, Andrew Recky's feature is a master class in push-pull. Did he, didn't he? And so I think that it was, for me, you never know what Andrew Jarecki thought. And so you, for years, think about how he felt about that family. Everyone at every Q&A is like, you know, how do you feel about Gypsy Rose? I'm like, you just had a whole movie to hear what I thought. And like, I'm not answering you because I don't have to answer because I just put it all in the movie. So it's like playing with the audience in a good way, but also like, there's just like this total linear way of storytelling, A to Z. And I think that we can be creatives that like don't think that way.
Right. Are there things about your life that have helped you approach it without the singular goal of judging? And is that a useful skill for a documentarian?
Yeah, I think that when critics review my work, they really see the human in it. It's basically, I'm on a run now of it's seen as non-judgmental filmmaking.
That's great.
People can exist in their imperfections in a way that it doesn't feel like I'm making fun of them.
Yeah.
And so I think that there is a genuine, real tie in from Secret Society. Because, like, you know, that is what it's about. But it's really, I think, and not to give him too much credit, but like really being in such close contact with my father, who was a master in journalism, in interviewing, but also like investigating and searching out identity and like knowing that your past does not predict your present. I think that growing up the way that I did really like led me to this moment.
I'm super impressed with your willingness to give so much credit to your dad, because especially when I was in my 20s and certainly even at 31, are you 31 now? I want to be like, no, I did this. Like, it's very impressive that you can acknowledge what a role he played. Do you think so, Monica?
Yeah, I do.
Less so than me.
Well, maybe it's a male-female thing again. I don't know. Yeah, it is. You do want to take credit for your accomplishments, and it's good to be able to see the whole picture, but everything.
I mean,
that's
I'm a
influenced.
director and I get credit for everything. And people like Terry Gross like sort of question me on nepotism and like, what are your feelings about, you know, you in relation to him? Did you get here because of him?
Right.
And I think that like now that he's not here, I don't have to be embarrassed about it. Like, you know, yes, he got me in the room, but it's up to me to see how long I can stay in the room. But then people are like, yeah, but you got in the room.
Yeah.
That's the whole barrier to entry issue.
Well, but here's the thing that people actually don't like to talk about with nepotism. It's a multi-layered situation. So let's say one of my two daughters ends up pursuing acting. Certainly they'll have an advantage in that they'll probably be able to meet with an agent earlier than someone who they don't recognize their last name. That's for sure. And that's unfair. But my daughter at 6 has already been to 25 sets. She's actually seen how the camera department works. She's seen how the script supervisor, what that person does. Like, she's actually getting this masterclass education for free. So that's nepotism. But at the same time, that's not a cheat. That's earned. She'll have an education the same way I had an education on how to do press events for General Motors new vehicle launches. No one wants that nepotism, but I got a firsthand master class in how to throw a fucking car show. So it's easy to discount the whole thing, but there's actually a ton of education that's the real gift of nepotism. It's not actually the foot in the door, because as to your point, you can't, sure, it'll get you invited to one of the parties, but
you know, you have famous parents, and you know, then like it's like, how do you sort of package that and do something with it? I think that like work ethic is really what we need to teach people. Your kids are seeing how hard you guys both work. And also like when you work, are you being kind to people?
yes.
And
my wife for certain, and me most of the time.
Can you back that up?
Yeah, I'd say so. I'd say that's right. Actually, I'd say both of you most of the time. She's not perfect either. No one's perfect.
That's true.
No one's perfect.
More nicer more often. Okay, so Gypsy Rose. What a fucking documentary.
Oh,
we like counted down the days till that came out.
Yep.
We watched that together.
Devoured it. Yeah. And then talked about it for 6 hours after or something.
Yeah.
So complicated.
I have her driver's license up in my fridge, Dee Dee's.
You do?
My boyfriend has said, please stop doing that.
As much as I loved it, I actually don't remember what happened. What was the outcome? I've totally forgotten.
So Gypsy Rose copped to second-degree murder in exchange for 10 years on a state prison charge, which means she needs to do 75% of it. Nicholas Godejohn, you know, he never even opened my letter requesting an interview. He forever was trying to get a trial. He finally got one, and he was sentenced to life in prison.
Oh,
and what people don't understand, and I don't know if it's telegraphed enough in the film, he is mentally ill. Like, he can barely form sentences. You look at his police interrogation tapes, and like, you know,
it's like Brian Dassey.
Brendan. Yes, I was just
Dassey.
about to say that from Making a Murder.
It's like, you know, there's so much weird like sex talk between him and the detective, and he's lured into this sort of false sense of like, oh, he's just telling a story about his girlfriend, and like, you know, he was protecting her, and like, I just don't think he had any awareness that he was like convicting himself through his confession. Like, you know, don't talk to cops. Don't talk to cops without a lawyer. I'm sorry. Like, you know, I enjoy law enforcement. I'm glad that they are there, but like, don't ever talk to a cop without a lawyer.
They just don't know. They don't have that knowledge.
Let's be a part of
Spreading it.
spreading that
Yeah.
knowledge.
I try to
I can't help you with that, officer.
That's my nature as well, to have that exact same takeaway. I don't know if you ever saw the Confessions, that front line. That was the most heartbreaking one I've ever
The
seen.
sailors, right?
Yes, they convinced 9 of these guys to confess to something they never did. They just kept throwing people in prison. I mean, it's horrific. Most of them mentally disabled in some capacity. But again, at the same time, I force myself to go, fuck, there's a lot of murderers out there. There's a lot of people that need to get taken off the street. It's a hard judicial system. It's completely flooded with too many cases. Everyone's back's against the wall. It's an imperfect system, blah, blah, blah. Also, they need to get murderers to confess for our safety. And we've tasked them with that job. I think like so many issues in this country and in life, both sides suck. I'm sympathetic to both sides. I'm sympathetic to the many people who are not mentally fit to have that interrogation experience. You have to be so alpha to fucking go through 12 hours with 2 grown men yelling in your face and not break. Like almost no person can do that. So it's
a system designed to create false confessions.
Yeah, they have tactics, specific tactics in order to get that.
I met with a police officer, a former police officer, he was known as the 8-ball, who like got people to confess. And like, he was honored throughout his entire police career in New York for always getting people to confess. And what I believed and what was later reported is they were false confessions.
Yeah.
He put them in positions of like pressure points and, would get them to say things because they wanted to leave. It's kind of like the Central Park 5 and like, I think that there is a universal that we think that innocent people do not confess.
Right.
And that is
It's just not true.
Yeah, statistically it's proven. It happens all the time. Yeah, it's heartbreaking. Okay, so currently, and it came out, a week or 2 ago, At the Heart of Gold Inside the USA Gymnastics Scandal. It's recently released, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So if people aren't hip to what this is about, there was for how many years? 18 years or something?
20.
For 20 years, there was a trainer/doctor who worked both at Michigan State University with the gymnastics program. He worked with dancers around Michigan. He was the U.S. gymnastics team trainer. Minimally 156 people spoke at the sentencing hearing.
156.
That's who spoke.
That many.
That's who spoke. Is there a number on how many victims?
Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds.
Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds.
Wow.
So this guy, first of all, very charismatic, very likable, very personable. These women, young girls, women were in this situation where their coaches are, borderline psychotic. They're as tough as they can be. There's no sympathy for pain. There's no nothing. It's soldier on. And then they would go for treatments with this guy who was super kind, would cheat a bit, would let them use their phones, or would let them do all these little tactics to be the good cop in this scenario. And he would give these, quote, treatments, and all the treatments involved him putting his fingers in their vaginas.
Quote, pelvic something, right?
Pelvic adjustments or something.
Right.
And, I don't even know where to begin. Where do you think is best to begin with this?
So basically the film really talks about grooming behaviors. And I think that, we as a culture have an image of Larry Nassar as this like kind of dopey, weird, broken man that's in an orange jumpsuit. And so it's really hard for us to recognize like why people would have been fooled by this guy. Mm-hmm. And so the film was really about like, he was the good guy. He was the nice guy. That's who he presented as. Always working in autism circles. His daughter had autism, happily married, always wore a wedding ring, seemed genuinely non-threatening, like he was a friend of yours, and then would participate in this vaginal treatment to help you. Mm-hmm. And, I think that there's just so many layers to that because, adolescent sexuality, how do I tell somebody... Because we don't talk to our parents about sex because it's seen as gross.
Right.
So when someone violates, how are we supposed to talk about that? And so Larry Nassar, as a doctor and as a family friend, was one of, he was a genius at setting up his life to get access to people. But really, really disturbingly, there was about 17 instances of reporting him to MSU where people were like, is this normal? Is it not normal? He escaped capture so many times.
Well, there were so many things I was thinking about during it, of course. One of the more provocative things I'll probably say about it is it's so weird to see a guy with such a lack of control over his own behavior, yet these crazy boundaries where he did manage to do this to hundreds and hundreds of girls, and he didn't
Calculated. He was a
enough.
deeply calculated person.
He didn't pull his penis out and try to have sex with them. He didn't, now granted, there were some cases at his house with the 6-year-old, which is horrific.
Ugh.
So he did do that, but it doesn't seem, at least in the documentary, in the treatments quote, he had these kind of rigid boundaries he didn't break. It's like you don't really see someone out of control yet that in control. That was fascinating to me.
Stay tuned for more Armchair Expert, if you dare.
I think you're so spot on. And I've talked to literally so many people about this, and nobody ever identifies that. And as an audience member, you're kind of left, you're like, I don't want to say this out loud, but like he was assaulting them with his hands. Like what stopped him from assaulting them with his genitalia? And so it's just like, I think that he knew what he could get away with and what he could not.
Yeah.
And like he wanted to keep the ruse up, and so he was able to stop himself. But here's, not to be too graphic, but like his other sort of ulterior life that nobody talks about is he was a collector of child pornography.
Right.
And so there was this whole layer of victimizing children through his digital life where I'm sure, there was no stopping him. I mean, he was found with 37,000 images.
I was just about to say, how about when his fucking attorney says 37,000 isn't really a lot? By comparison,
imagine sitting there and like being in that room with her, and I just like shoveling in the dog shit of that statement. I mean, every single photo is the victimization of a child, and she's someone. She reached out. She thought the documentary was really smart and nuanced and showed like the real journey of it. So like, props to her for sitting. I'm so impressed with her.
Yeah.
But like, it's a reason why it's in the movie, because it's ludicrous.
Yes.
And it's not appropriate. And we cannot lose our way. She has dealt with so many cases surrounding pedophiles. So like in her life, that number is not a lot. In our lives, one is not it's not acceptable.
Yes.
Yeah.
37,000 to her was not. It was a challenging documentary to watch in the best way, because I had to constantly check my emotions, because I would go, oh, I fucking hate that woman. And then I would go, no, I do believe in the legal system. People are entitled to a defense no matter what. And for the system to work, there has to be a person that takes that case to defend that guy. So I constantly was like fighting in my head
you'll
in a
notice
great
that
way.
I didn't tell you about his background. I didn't tell you about his family life. I didn't tell you where he grew up, because it was a choice. Like, this is not Larry Nassar's movie. He doesn't get to have his own movie on HBO. You know who gets to have the movie is the women that survived him.
Yeah, what a great... And were you worried if you had shown his childhood that he would start becoming more sympathetic?
I knew that the women were going to watch it, and I did not want... we took a risk in including his instructional videos, which is like his taped sessions with young girls, and including his voice. But like that was the extent of it, because we can talk about the abuse without humanizing the abuser to a certain extent.
Right. Did you request an interview with him?
Yes.
You did. And he's obviously said no.
As a general rule of thumb journalistically, you reach out to everybody and they get to say no. And to be honest, like a lot of people at the jump said no. I think that it's just even for you as an audience member, it's so painful to get through. So like for people to relive and for me to ask them to do that, it's a choice.
Have you had any trauma?
It's a genuine inquiry for people because of Mommy, Dead and Dearest and gymnastics. I don't know. I think I'm put on earth to try to give voices to the voiceless. Mm-hmm. And that's something that resonates with me, is like being a kid and being unsure and like how to regain your voice, but not experience sexual trauma in that way. Why do you think that film is so difficult to watch? I really have been getting that feedback from almost everyone. And I really tried to limit the time spent. Like, it's an 88-minute film.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted you to exist in there, but to feel empowered.
Mm-hmm.
Why is it so painful and difficult?
Well, the fact that the victims in this movie are both young girls, that seems to be where our empathy is strongest. That's what makes the cover of the New York Times. So that's an element. I think another thing is, and this is documented by Paul Bloom, I think, that it's a double tragedy when you've availed yourself with vulnerability to somebody and it's exploited. For some reason, getting tackled in an alley is less troubling to us than us participating and being vulnerable with someone that's trusted, i.e. a medical professional.
Yeah.
He calls it betrayal bias.
Betrayal.
Wow.
So it's very weighted. And the example is this doctor who was faking people having cancer and was treating them and killed many of them. And for some reason, that's much higher on the, the pissed off meter, because we acknowledge that you're exposing yourself to somebody. In these girls' case, for sure, they're laying on a table and they're surrendering, kind of.
A trusted person.
Yeah. So I think that's
and
an
they're
element.
also in pain. And so he's helping with their pain to a certain extent. So really confusing them sort of psychologically, like Isabel Hutchins, who's in the film, who's a gymnast. She said it made me wonder what pain really was.
Oof.
Uh-huh.
I also think it's probably really hard for people to watch because they feel like that really could have been me, or that really could be my daughter at any moment. Like, it's easy for that to happen to people.
And that's not the same thing with Gypsy Rose. Like, it's so
Right.
far away from our sort of concept of motherhood and of youth.
Exactly.
That's interesting. Okay.
Yeah, and then I think yet another layer is there's no way that you can write the victims off. These are people who have dedicated their lives to make America fare well in the Olympics. They're already sacrificing themselves. You can't possibly paint them in with a dismissive paintbrush. Yeah, no one could say like Simone Biles would ever deserve anything bad. Like, this is a girl who's brought glory to our country in
National treasure.
yes,
Yeah.
and through great pain to her own body. Like, we see that. Where, like, if anyone doesn't deserve this, it's these gals. I think that's part of it.
But the thing about abuse is like no one does.
No one does.
No.
That's why
And so
this is a great story.
But-
because you can't paint anything on it. So you have to just take it in as this is happening, and it's abuse regardless.
But it's a human phenomenon. Like, you keep thinking it can't be worse, and then yet it keeps getting worse. But at the same time, you can acknowledge it's all equally terrible. But we do have these layers of like, no, that's even
The
more
levels
vulnerable.
of vulnerability.
Yeah. Make it
Down
the
to our studs.
victimhood even. Yes. Wow. It's such a good documentary. Okay. A couple things I thought of when I was watching it. Well, one of the things that's really complex in it and that led to a good, healthy debate between Kristen and I last night was she had zero sympathy for the people who were friends with Larry, who it was brought to their attention that he was abusing the girls, and they covered it up for him. And I think it's horrific that they did. There's the one woman in particular, Kathy
Klages, yeah.
Klages, who seemed particularly offensive in her denial. So this gal finally at MSU goes to her and says he's doing something that he shouldn't be doing. And she says, that's crazy. No, it's not. She brings in all these older gymnasts to tell her she's crazy. She says, okay, I'll file the report, but everyone's going to get in trouble. You want everyone to get in trouble? And then she finally says, no, don't file the report. She talks her out of it, right? And it's horrendous. It's so horrendous. And yet I forced myself to imagine that they come to me and say, Monica has been molesting kids. It's complicated because I'm now in possession of information that's going to ruin someone's life that I love. Now, of course, from the outside, yes, their life deserves to be ruined. But the one thing I was a little sympathetic is Larry's the piece of shit. And now everyone around Larry is infected by his piece of shit-ism. Kathy might have been a beautiful person outside of that situation. I don't know her, I've never met her, but we could at least presume it's possible that she otherwise has led a great life. And now because he's such a vile piece of shit, she's now in this crazy unique situation where she has a moral conundrum that she has to choose right or wrong, and she chose wrong. And it's just, she too is a victim of this asshole. She did the wrong thing, but she's also a victim of this asshole.
Yeah, I mean, that's a deeply elevated way of thinking about it, because it's like putting yourself in the position of, what do we do when someone confides in us? And because adults protect other adults. And I think that there's always this tendency with young girls, with Kathy, and we're talking about Larissa Boyce, the gymnast who came to her, and that you're confused. He's helping you. He's never done that. And Larissa's like, no, like, it's happening to my body and I'm telling you. And so institutions and individuals will protect people in their community. And so that's why it has to be handed over as mandatory reporters to investigators.
Yes.
But one of the issues that I find with that argument, to poke holes in my own argument, is like Nassar was investigated in 2004. In 2014, he consistently met with police officers about his behavior, and he was able to talk his way out of it.
Oh, Monica, the tapes of the interviews by the police.
FOIA'd, and it was,
See, now here we go. So now we're back to kind of the point I was making. Like, I would have loved the alpha bulldog motherfucker to be interrogating that piece of shit. Now I want it. Now I want him to go, bullshit. Wait, where are you putting your fingers? That's not a fucking treatment. I don't care if you say you've lectured on it at something. I wanted someone to call bullshit. I wanted there to be a really strong, convicted investigator to go, you're full of shit. So that's why all this is so complicated. It's like, I did want that person at that moment.
But you wouldn't be actively trying to get a false confession. He'd be getting a real one.
Yes, but I do think it's tricky for those people. I don't know that I subscribe to the notion that many of those guys know that they're getting a false conviction. I think they drink their Kool-Aid quickly. They do?
I think they do.
Okay.
It's by get a confession by any means necessary. As a person who has watched the entirety of the Nassar tapes, me to you, he is deeply comfortable. He is making jokes. Even if he were with the alpha guy, he would not be getting the same guilty signals that he does from typical defendants. Nassar was able to pull the wool over most people because he believed in the lie so deeply.
Yeah.
He is a medical professional. This is what he does. He needs to follow the procedure. But he made everybody around him sort of believe and embolden the lie. And that's, that's what made him sort of so beloved, because he was charismatic and able to do it. Yeah. And also that you just didn't suspect him. Many of the gymnasts that I spoke to, and it was dancers and other people, they came to his defense at the jump, because they were like, he couldn't have done this. He told me this is for me helping people. One of the most surreal moments of my life was when I was sitting across from Trinae Gonzar, who's a survivor and a gymnast, and she realized in real time that she had silenced other gymnasts who came to her about the procedure.
Oof.
Yes, and it's so heartbreaking that there's the first wave of guilt and trauma from being a victim of his, and then a second wave of guilt, which is maybe even surpasses that she had silenced so many people and prevented this person from being found out.
Yeah, I mean, I would encourage everybody to, one, watch the movie, but two, watch Trinae Gonzar's victim impact statement in its entirety. And it's on YouTube. And it's the only one where Nassar completely lost his mind and broke down emotionally, because he almost he wouldn't recognize the young women who came up to do the victim impact statements. Trinae, he knew.
Yeah.
She told him, I've known you for 31 out of 37 years. We loved you like family because we thought you loved us back.
Yeah.
Oh, geez.
The whole time I'm waiting to see him admit to himself he's done this. And that was the only moment that I thought, oh God, she got him to
feel it,
leave denial for a minute.
And that is really what's key here. For a minute.
Yeah. Yeah.
In his apology, and I've spoken with Judge Aquilina, when he reverted back to his former self of this is the victims are being opportunistic, and I really was trying to help them.
Yes.
I mean, it's psychologically
and there's
terrifying.
a very crazy moment, Monica, because all these people over the course of 4 days, 156 people say into a microphone how his actions have impacted their life. And for the most part, he's in another place. I mean, in fact, I was obsessed with wondering, like, where does someone go during this? As much as I hated him, I couldn't help but imagine being him. Like, what if I was sitting there for 4 days hearing about hundreds of lives I've ruined? What is that experience like? Where do you go mentally to survive that? You know, it's the ultimate.
Where do you go now when he's in solitary? I mean, they go to the same place. It's the absence of nothing. It's the memories of my life used to be like. Yeah.
At the end of that, he gets to say something. And it starts off, you think he's kind of copping to it and saying sorry, and then you start realizing he's doing it in front of you all over again. He's re-grooming all the women in there. He's like looking at them. He turns away from the judge and he starts employing his fucking superpower.
Skills.
Real time. And I don't even know that he's aware of it. It's so who he is. It's freaky. Okay. It was articulated in this. The hardest elements of it for many of the athletes in dealing with it is they have been demonstrating since they were 5 or 6 that they're incredibly strong. It's their identity.
Yep.
They're indomitable.
Yeah.
They don't feel pain. They can march through anything. And so that dissonance between being a victim and being your identity as someone who's strong is so powerful. And it's such another layer of mind fuck to it.
I think it's like the duality of identity. Am I strong or am I a victim? How can these two polar opposite things exist in one person and in myself? And there's just, what's it called? Survivor's complex? Survivor
guilt, yeah.
Like, it's like he did it worse for somebody else. And like, you know, I'm still here and I'm, that didn't happen to me. And then girls would be like, it did happen to me. And I just was like, blacking it out emotionally.
Yeah.
The shame and remorse that I would come into close contact with, like interacting with these women. And I really wanted to be a person in their life that said like, you did nothing wrong.
Yeah.
Nothing.
Yes. But this is a thing that has come up like 3 times on here, and I haven't refined it enough to make a really elegant point about it. But in my own experience, I had been dealing with it for however many years, 30 years, in just terms of it's not my fault. That person was a predator. It wasn't giving me relief. No matter how many times someone says it's not your fault, it wasn't giving me relief. And I didn't know why. And it wasn't till I did the 4-step in AA where I was like, what if I applied that lens to this scenario? And what happened for me was going, oh, I didn't want to be there. I knew I didn't want to be there. My spidey senses were saying this is not right, but I wanted something from that person. And that person had leverage over me, but I wanted something. That's why I was in the situation. Once I admitted that to myself, I at least isolated why it wasn't going away, because it doesn't matter how many times people say to me, it's not your fault. I needed to first go like, what am I actually feeling guilty about? Oh, I know what I'm feeling guilty about because I wanted something from the person and I wasn't listening to my insides. Now, I can at least own that. And then I can forgive myself because I was fucking 7 years old, and 7-year-olds, they make bad decisions, and I made a bad decision, and it's okay. Like, but I couldn't jump to that where it just, I was solely a victim. Like, I've never sought treatment for this, and hopefully the people that guide people through this experience isolate that part. But I just wonder if that's an element that's missing that I happen to be lucky enough to cross streams on.
Well, it's like knowledge is power. You activating that understanding of like why the shame wasn't going away is deeply powerful, because it's not what most people do is where they push it down until it doesn't exist. But like, but this persists inside of us.
And again, I would be projecting and just imagining, but if I'm in this militant, terrible scenario and then I'm meeting with somebody who's being kind and loving to me, and then there's one part of it I've got to ignore because I do like that kindness and I need it, and I need
that. And he is healing. He's doing like actual work on your body. And so what was scary is like girls would tell me like they felt better after the appointment.
Yes.
And so it was just like, I feel better, but so I was a willing participant in what happened. And I'm like, oh.
Right, which is not your fault. But if you're that person, I think you have to, it's okay to first acknowledge that. Like, Yeah, that's part of it, and that's what's so complicated about it. And it's what's complicated about Neverland is like they loved him. That it's not
It was
getting
a
tackled in an
romantic
alley.
relationship.
Yeah.
That's what Dan Reed, the director, he groomed them, and like that Michael viewed them as partners and treated them as equals, and like how to be equal with a demigod. Like, how could you ever say no to that reality? Because everyone's like, well, why did you keep going back to the ranch?
Yeah.
How could you not?
Exactly.
I know. I hate
exactly.
these people that are saying like, oh, they want money. They defended him at one time. It's like, yes, they did.
Nobody wants this tied to their identity. No amount of money is worth it.
Nope. No, it's horseshit.
Yeah.
Okay, I would say the most heartbroken I was during your documentary, and of course it's because I'm a dad, I think, is there's one case, Monica, where the girl, her name is
Kyle Stevens.
Kyle Stevens. She went to her parents and said, he's doing this. And they were friends with him. And they said, no, he's not. You're lying. Stop lying. It caused this rift between her and her dad. Every time they get in a fight, he'd bring up, you need to go say sorry to Larry.
Oh, God.
Then it eventually came out and the dad killed himself.
And so there's a shot in the film, and it's the court cinematographer, Nick Loud, who Kyle Stevens is talking, but she's talking about the denial of her parents and that they did not believe her. And so the camera slowly shifts towards the mom. And so like when you're in doing victim impact statements, you can have a support system and you have a person next to you, and the grief and trauma that is on her mother's face. Oof. Like, I did not believe her, and now my family has been decimated. And like she wears it on her face. They'll never exist as a family again because they picked Larry Nassar over their kid.
That's yet another element of the movie that makes it hard to watch, is that as a parent, you could fail at your job of protecting them. Once you have kids, it's you could fucking rape me for the next 8 hours every day for the rest of my life to spare my kid having one thing happen, So in Monica, the parents were in the room many times while he was doing this.
Well, see, that's a part of this that's very confusing, is people like, sure, that's part of the procedure. Like, why wouldn't it be? There's a lot of weird stuff in when you go to the doctor.
There's no reason for a doctor to have an ungloved hand inside your prepubescent vagina. Like,
yes.
So, and he would put a towel over. I mean, what I, as a person who's heavily researched it, I really thought of it as an escalation. Like, you're talking about that Larry Nassar was able to exist in this sort of like coded space of boundaries. But I personally think that like the behavior started to ramp up. It was less about picking the person that was quiet and more about that he had to pick everybody. I mean, we're talking about
his addiction grew, like all addictions.
Yeah.
One of the gals interviewed the mind fuck of laying on the table, feeling him enter her vagina and going, this shouldn't be happening. Then looking at mom, and mom's fine, so this must be fine.
Yeah, that's
deep.
Hard.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's horrible. Do you think the mom is avoiding the situation, or is she thinking it's fine?
I think that the parents were as groomed as the kids were.
Yeah.
And I think that if you are a gymnastics parent, you're trained that these are people in positions of authority. They're trying to get your kid in the right spot. And so it creates and fosters a culture of silence, and that I don't get to have a voice in the care of my child. I mean, at the Crowley Ranch, where a lot of the national team members trained, parents were not allowed in the gym. I mean, gymnastics is a culture that represents our society, and that like it's ambition, it's intensity, it's the American dream, it's succeeding. You will break down your body to get where you want to go, to get that 1 of 5 spot in the Olympic Games. At what cost?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. There's a much broader question on the table while you're watching it, which isn't really explicitly asked, which is they show an x-ray of a gal's tibia that had broken. They are ignoring it, and it just keeps working its way deeper into it and splitting it like a railroad spike going through a piece of wood. And you look at that and you go, what the fuck is this all about? I mean, like, okay, there's sexual abuse, but there's most certainly, by any rational definition, there's just straight up physical abuse that is accepted to even do the thing. And then I just go, what is this all about? So someone can say they're the best in the world at something.
The American way, man.
Is there inherent value in that? Or is that just ego? We want to say it as a country. The kids want to say it. The parents want to say it. It's like, I see the pure pursuit from the kids' point of view, and there's something kind of unsullied about that. But everyone around that's participating, no one's going, wait, what the fuck are we doing? There's a contest every 4 years, and these kids have to fucking ruin their lives and their bodies permanently, and all these things. To say I'm number one, something about it doesn't feel entirely self-actualized, even as a pursuit in general.
You know, as a deeply ambitious person, like, I got it. I understood, like, you think you are the lottery ticket winner. You are this American exceptionalism that we sort of participate in, that it's like, you know, all the sweat equity of the last couple of years will pay off in this moment. And like, you know, in AA, we know that as to be sort of delusions. But when you are a part of a community that, you know, is just incredibly siloed, you believe in it. And I think that, I mean, I love that you're having this like, what the fuck? Because like, why does this matter? But like, as somebody who like always desired something like that, I got it. I felt a part of it, a part of the rationale. Right.
Yeah. Within it too, foundationally, it's story. I mean, that's really what it's fucking the Iliad. It's greatness. It's the hero. It's the, you know, the victor. It's all these things. Like, it's all.
And a role that young women don't always get to play. You know, I think that it's so incredible that gymnastics is like the premier sport of the
most
Olympics.
Watched, right?
And, you know, I think that it's always the dude in the Iliad. Like, we're always looking at who is Homer. And so I think that it felt really good for women to be in control of their bodies and be powerful and can do things that nobody else could do.
I also said this the other day. Winning feels amazing. It does. It really does psychologically feel incredible, and you chase it, especially if you have the opportunity.
Especially if you're an addict, you're like, boop, where's the dopamine? What's the lever?
Monica's a state champion.
Hell yeah.
2-time state champion cheerleader.
For cheerleading, it gets a little less impressive when I say that.
Think
so.
No.
But yeah, it was really fun. And at the state championship, the second year, I had torn my hamstring, and I still was like, no, I'm doing it. I'm obviously doing it. I worked so hard this whole time for this last day. I can push through.
Yeah, I guess I wish there was a version where all the self-esteem just came from, you should be proud of working hard and pushing through challenges. But
America doesn't reward that.
Yeah.
It does.
But
it's just going to the championship. We don't talk about every day she worked. We talk about her getting to the championship.
Yeah.
Right.
And when it's a team, I mean, gymnastics is a little different, but there's still a team aspect. You're letting everybody down. Then all these people who worked really hard don't get the thing. Like, there's a lot of pressure.
Yeah, and I guess I'm just projecting onto everybody. In my life, when I've gotten the gold medal, it doesn't fill anything up for me. It does for a couple hours or maybe 2 weeks, but it being something structural in my self-esteem, it just hasn't worked that way for me. And probably it does work that way for some people. Some people probably win a gold medal and they feel markedly better for the rest of their life. That just wouldn't be me.
Well, I think there's a validation to your effort. And people like that. You need that. Most people, not all people, but
like, you know, writing a book about my father and being able just to actually write it. Like, when I turned in the 5th and final draft, I said, I have no control over how this sells. I have no control how it's received in combination with the beautiful book, The Night of the Gun. But like, the simple act of finishing it felt incredible. And I was like, I need to remind myself, because I'm going to get so looped into, you know, what's going to happen. Like, whenever I make something, it's like, are people going to watch it? Or, you know,
Yes.
you can't control these things.
yeah, the result.
Yeah, my favorite AA cliche is we're in the show up and work business, not the results business. And if I can keep my eye on that, I'm generally happy. But if I need a result to validate me, I'm fucked, because then I'm at the whimsy of the universe.
But I feel like that's exactly where I am now as I sit here. Like, you want the things to pay off. You want the hard work to pay off.
Now, Now, I think it's a good pursuit if the reason you want it to work out is to allow you to do it more. Then I think that's like a noble intrinsic pursuit, weirdly, even though it's got an extrinsic goal. But if it's just to allow you to keep doing the thing you love and allowing you to get things greenlit, that feels like a good motivation. But to be the toast of this town and the fucking win an award, to me, that just feels untenable as far as self-esteem goes. You just can't be the toast of the town every year until the day you die.
Yeah, I mean, I, like many in this room, like am a deep workaholic. I measure my success against what I did last year. And I want to get better, brighter, faster, stronger. But at a certain point, like I've been hospitalized twice in the last couple of years. I have a chronic lung condition. Like,
which one?
I had cryptogenic organizing pneumonia, which was actually interstitial lung disease. Just like, I'm not going to sit in a cool attic with a toilet near me and like complain about my lung condition because I work too much. I understand how that sounds, but I think
a cool attic with a toilet near me.
like, I just, I don't know. Like, I'm interested in other people's perspectives on it. Like, workaholism is so rewarded, but it doesn't create a deep sense of fulfillment like we thought it was going to.
That's
like,
kind
what
of
do you think?
That's the point I'm making.
So what do we do it? How do we do the work, put in the time, feel good about it, and not be so goal oriented?
Well, again, I think in a dream world, the process is the result. Like that's what you're after, is the engagement you have while making a movie, the connection you have with the people on your crew, the discovery of the story. All that stuff is beautiful and wonderful. All the other stuff is just faux reward. There's no substance to the reward. The substance is in the making it. That's the on your deathbed.
But it's so painful. The part is so painful.
Well, that's, I think the goal of most creative people should be like, how do I create the process in a way that I love it? That I'm not killing myself for the result. For me personally, that feels like the healthy approach, is like, if I can learn to craft this mousetrap in a way that I'm enjoying every step of it, then I've won.
And not be so fearful about losing it. Like I watched a video with you like off camera and talked about when we have something, our immediate impulse is to fear losing it.
Yes.
And like now that I have a career as a documentary director, all I worry about is losing it.
Yes.
It's just like, like I keep adding gigs and like, because it's a scarcity complex. I feel like I won't be hired again.
Right.
And like, that's an idiot island. Population of one.
Yeah. All right. So your book, All That You Leave Behind, a memoir, is out currently. At the Heart of Gold Inside the USA Gymnastics Scandal is playing currently on HBO. And then your next movie, what's that entitled?
I Love You, Now Die.
I Love You, Now Die.
Oh, that's the text. Oh, yeah. Oh,
so
I can't
romantic. I'll wait to see your take on it. But we watched some shorter expose on it. It might even been Dateline. And Kristen and I were on opposite sides of the argument. I was like, you're allowed to say whatever you want. I'm sorry. Their own suicide's their responsibility. But maybe I'll have a different takeaway after watching it'll be fun. When's that come out?
Well, I designed it in a way. So the first episode is the prosecution.
Oh, and there's episodes?
The second episode is the defense. And so Michelle Carter did not get a trial. She opted for a bench trial, which means a judge decided her fate. And so I want us to serve as her jury. And so it's just like this, like very sort of like in the trilogy of the stuff I've made for HBO, like the push-pull, guilty, innocent.
Yeah.
And, we have 10,000 of her text messages. So it's a uniquely 21st century crime because you go to her state of mind, like when this stuff is happening in real time. And it's just wild stuff.
Well, the thing I saw, I would conclude she is a vomitous piece of shit. Like that's my verdict on her. She is vile. But I have enough libertarian in me that's like, tough shit. No one can tell you to kill yourself. That's on you. At some point, you have to have personal responsibility for killing yourself, even if someone's a vile piece of shit in your ear. But I'll be open to being wrong and having my opinion changed on what date?
It'll be in July.
Sometime in
All right.
July.
Great.
That's great.
My twin sister works in the mental health field, and for our birthday, I was like, I want to show you like the finished copy of the project, and she got like 20 minutes in. She's like, yeah, I can't. This is my first thing. I just can't with this. Like, as a mental health professional, she's like, I can't. This goes against every instinct I have in my craft. Like,
Yeah.
it's another sort of polemic devastator. I'm not going to talk about my own work, but like my attitudes towards Michelle Carter really shifted after I learned more about her. And so this is like, there's a lot in there, I believe, that people don't know.
Oh, great.
So a lot of my sober friends listen to your podcast, and I just was like, I really want you, why do you like listening to this? And they said, like, it feels like I'm the one asking the questions. Like, it feels, and so I think that like, as I study other people's styles, like, it's just like, how do you get people to open up and feel safe?
Well, to me, it's a meeting. We're having a meeting. You and I happen to know how that goes, but other people that come have never been in a meeting, and then this is their first meeting. You're like,
I think more people should just go to meetings.
yes, I do too.
They
There should
don't
be
let
sober.
you in unless you're
No, there's
so
open.
On
There's
anniversary
open.
meetings, you can go.
Also, there's open meetings. Like, they're labeled in the AA directory what are open and what are closed, and many of them are open. So
It's
you
like,
could.
go in a room, sit for an hour, and you don't get to talk. I think for anybody, especially in like media, it's like no one cares what you have to say for the next hour.
Yeah.
It's like, and last night it was 90 minutes I went to one. I was like, oh my God, when is it my turn?
Right.
What's going on here? He's talking forever. The timer has gone up. And it's just like being, existing in other people's story, I think is a really healthy thing. So I encourage everyone to go to open meetings and like exist in someone else's story, because like we have a tendency to just sit inside our own head.
Yeah.
And like, what an uninteresting place to be. Because we're typically just telling ourselves the same thing.
Yeah, minimally, it's repetitive.
I was listening to the best of episodes. All of them are great, obviously. And I was like getting so psyched out. I was like, what if I'm not as interesting as these amazing people? And I was like, that, path to madness. We can just be what we can be.
That's right. That's right. Well, Erin, it's been so fun talking to you.
Yes,
I was
thank
so
you.
delighted when I started connecting all the other dots, having met your father and loved that book and worried about you as a little baby in a story, and now you're here safe on my couch. So I feel very relieved.
Me too.
I love you. Please come back. I'm sure you'll make 80 more movies before we're done with this.
Can't
So
wait.
I wish you luck and Godspeed.
Thank you.